beautiful, 8 months pregnant, he agrees to spend the weekend with her mother-in-law, Dorothy. She never imagined the nightmare that awaited her. Locked in the basement of an isolated house, the young woman is forced to give birth to her own, without any medical help under the controlling look of Dorothy, who believes that childbirth should be done in the traditional way. But what begins as a simple act of control becomes something darker and more revealing, where secrets, fears, and emotions are exposed. It was a muffled Saturday morning when Linda, a 28-year-old, 8-month-old pregnant woman, decided that it would be a good idea to spend the weekend with her in-laws. The relationship with Dorothy, his mother-in-law, had always been difficult. Dorothy, a rigid woman with strong opinions and an imposing personality, had never hidden her contempt for Linda, considering her weak and unable to take care of herself, much less from her son. However, after an insistent invitation and promises that everything would be fine, Linda decided to visit their house. When Linda arrived, she felt the house strange. Silence was oppressive, almost as if something was waiting to happen. Dorothy, with a forced smile, greeted her and said, "I hope you're ready, honey. I've prepared the room for you to rest." But instead of a welcoming room, what Linda found was a cold and dark space, a kind of basement, with few windows and little ventilation. When he asked about the room situation, Dorothy replied with a cold calm, "This is the best place to give birth. Isolation is required." Beautiful, not fully understanding, accepted the situation. After all, Dorothy had always been strange, but never something as absurd as that. However, something was different that weekend. The environment, Dorothy's words, everything seemed to be conspiring against her. In the following days, things started to become even more uncomfortable. Dorothy began to say that the birth of the baby should be done in a more traditional way, without modern doctors or interventions. For her, the process should be natural, as it was in her time. Each Linda suggestion about the hospital or doctors was ignored. One night, when Linda was in the kitchen, Dorothy approached with a tense and emotionless expression. "Are you ready for delivery? I don't know if I understand it, but I don't want to give birth here, Dorothy. Are you sure this is safe?" Linda asked, feeling the panic grow. Dorothy just smiled enigmatically, and without further explanation, he said the safest place was the basement. Beautiful, reluctantly, gave in to the pressure, but something inside was warning her that what was going on there was not right. And that's how Linda was locked in the basement of Dorothy's house alone, as the night approached, and the tension increased. The sound of the iron of the door locking in the mind of Linda, a strange feeling invading. What seemed to be a simple birth now became a terrifying experience. Linda felt a tight knot in the stomach. Dorothy's house has always been strange to her, but she had never imagined something could really go wrong. Since the beginning of the pregnancy, she tried to deal with the difficult relationship with her mother-in-law, which had no point in disguising her contempt. Dorothy had always believed that modern women were far from the old values, and this made her even more critical and suspicious of everything that Linda did. The pregnant girl grew up in a loving family, where she always had support and affection. But as she marries David, she had to adapt to a new world. David, her husband, was always protective, but her mother's presence, Dorothy, always seemed to make Linda feel insecure. When Dorothy invited her to that weekend, beautiful, trying to save the relationship and create a bond with her mother-in-law, he accepted without question. That night, the wind was whistled through the trees outside the house. Constant sound, like a sinister melody, seemed to increase tension in the environment. Linda tried to stay calm, sitting on the small couch that was in a corner of the basement, looking at the few simple and old furniture that decorated the environment. The weak light of a lamp hanging from the ceiling barely illuminated the space, creating shadows that moved and danced through the walls, intensifying the sensation of claustrophobia. Dorothy had given her a thick blanket and some pillows, asking her to be comfortable until the delivery began. Linda tried not to think about the strange words of her mother-in-law, trying to ignore the growing sense of discomfort. But something was definitely wrong. The atmosphere seemed tight and suffocating, and the humid smell of the basement only made things look heavier. That night, she heard the door closing, and the sound of the key turning in the lock. The feeling of being isolated, of being left behind, caused a chill to go through his spine. As much as it tried to rationalize, fear was palpable. She looked at the dark, to the locked door, and wondered how she had reached that point. When he had talked to David for the last time, he looked hesitant, but she had convinced him that everything would look good. "She's just my mother," David had said. "She cares too much. You'll see, she just wants to help." But what Linda didn't know was that Dorothy's obsession with control was far beyond what she imagined. To her mother, in law, giving birth was a moment of purity and devotion, where everything should be done according to the rules she believed to be correct. The hospital, the doctors, the modern interventions, all that was a sign of weakness and disrespect. And Beautiful, unknowingly, had fallen into the trap Dorothy had carefully armed. As the night advanced, the pain of contractions intensified. Linda tried to keep calm, but it was impossible not to feel the fear grow inside her. Each breath seemed more difficult, and the pressure on his body increased every moment. She wanted to call Dorothy, ask for help, but something in her instinct said it wouldn't be good. The silence in the basement was interrupted only by the sound of his own contractions and the light rustle from the leaves outside. The hours seemed to drag, and Beautiful felt the pain in the body, the anguish in his mind. Alone. This was how he felt. Completely alone, even in a full house. Then the basement door suddenly opened, and the figure of Dorothy appeared at the entrance, his silhouette against the light. The woman's face was impassive, her cold eyes, but something had changed in her eyes. "It's time," said Dorothy, his voice as calm as soon as he said about time or a daily task. She entered the basement without haste, her fixed granddaughter on her granddaughter that would soon be born. Linda tried to get up, but the pain was unbearable. "Dorothy, I can't take it. I need help. A doctor. Please." Dorothy looked at her with disdain, her face revealing a stiffness that made the young woman feel even smaller. "None of this, dear. Birth needs to be natural. Don't worry, you'll be strong. I'll be here. Now breathe. Breathe as I taught." Linda didn't know what was happening, but she felt her body was being forced to act against her will. The pain increased, and with it, fear and feeling of impotence. Dorothy, as if he realized Linda's affliction, stepped toward her, and with almost scary softness, put his hand on his shoulder. "I'll be here with you, honey. In the end, you will understand that everything I did was for your good and the good of my grandson." But as these words echoed, Linda began to realize something. Something that went beyond Dorothy's control. Something she herself did not understand completely. Deep down, she felt that the biggest challenge would not be the birth itself, but what she was about to discover, not just about her mother, in law, but about herself. The contractions were intensifying, and Linda could no longer control the pain. Her breath became increasingly difficult, and she desperately tried to focus to go through that moment. The fear of being alone in that basement, without any medical support, consumed her. Each time he tried to speak to Dorothy, his voice was lost in the dark void of the house. The impassive look of her mother, in-law, seemed to be the only thing she could see, as if there was no other human being there. Dorothy, with his inexpressive expression, just watched Linda's suffering with a disconcerting calm. There was no visible emotion on his face, no sign of compassion. It was as if she was there just to fulfill a mission. Every word of encouragement that came out of Dorothy's mouth was cold, almost like a command. "Breathe. This will pass. Remember what I taught you," she said, her low and firm, almost emotionless voice. Linda tried to follow the instructions, but the pain grew relentlessly, and her thoughts began to shuffle. She didn't know if she was losing consciousness, or if it was the fear that made her feel so far away from everything around her. "You're doing everything right, Beautiful. It's on the right track," Dorothy repeated like a mantra. Time seemed to have stopped. Linda looked around, trying to find some way out of the anguish she felt. The tight and stuffy atmosphere, with the cold walls and the damp smell, seemed to swallow their sanity. The only thing she wanted was the sense of security of a hospital, professionals who knew how to deal with the complications of a birth. But at that moment, she could no longer think rationally. The contractions were out of control, and she had no strength to ask for help again. What had begun as a Dorothy control experience turned into a struggle for survival itself. I can't take it anymore, Dorothy. Please help me," she begged, her voice shaking with pain and despair. Dorothy looked at her with a cold look, and for the first time, Linda saw a shadow of something different on her mother-in-law's face. It was not a look of affection or worry, but something deeper, a contained sadness. I can't. You have to do this alone. It's the life cycle, Beautiful. You have to face." Only then you will be strong. You will understand when everything is over. The sound of his own voice, so broken and vulnerable, made it beautiful to stop fighting the pain. She looked at her mother-in-law, not understanding what was happening. What did Dorothy really wanted? Why did she insist so much in this isolation? But at that moment, Linda had no more strength to question. All I wanted was the end of that situation, the arrival of the baby, and the sense of security that seemed so far away. And it was at this moment that something unexpected happened. In the midst of contractions, the sound of something moving behind her caught her eye. She looked back and saw the shadow of a figure at the basement door. It was a tall figure with a dark hood covering the face. Linda's heart hit faster and a wave of fear took her completely. "Who's there?" she shouted, trying to keep her calm. But her voice came out almost like a whisper. Dorothy turned slowly, his eyes narrowing to see the figure. The once impassive mother-in-law's face was now showing a real surprise, something Linda had never seen before. The woman looked tense, and for a moment the papers were reversed. Linda saw her mother-in-law for fear, and it made her even more confused. Who could be that person? What was she doing there? The figure, silent, entered the basement, and before Linda could react, she went to Dorothy and said something low. Linda could not hear the words, but the tone of voice of the figure was soft, almost reassuring. The tension in the air was palpable. "I didn't know you would bring him here," said Dorothy with the same calm, but now his voice was loaded with something beautiful could not identify. "I needed to," answered the figure, with a serious and muffled voice. "She's ready, Dorothy." Linda felt a shiver through her spine. Who were those people? What was happening there? Dorothy, now visibly uncomfortable, looked at Linda. For the first time, his countenance showed a dash of genuine emotion, but it was not compassionate. It was an expression of regret, and at the same time a look loaded with fear. "Linda, I didn't want it to be like this," said Dorothy, once again with a low and almost embarrassed voice. "I thought it was the best for you, for the baby." But what Linda didn't know was that Dorothy had kept a secret, something that would change everything. Dorothy's control over childbirth was not just about teaching beautiful to be strong, but about a much more sinister plan, something she would never imagine. Before Linda could ask more, the figure next to Dorothy spoke again. "It's time for you to find out the truth, beautiful." The tension in the room exploded, and the words of that figure marked the beginning of a journey that would forever change the lives of everyone there. What was a birth controlled by an authoritarian mother-in-law would become an unexpected confrontation, and the secrets of Dorothy's past would finally be revealed. Linda was in shock, could not process everything that was happening. The dark figure who was now next to Dorothy seemed to radiate an aura of mystery. His presence in that basement, along with the enigmatic words he had just said, created a growing sense of dread. Dorothy, usually so firm and controlling, now seemed lost, as if dealing with something much larger than he could control. "What's going on, Dorothy? Who is this person? What's going on with me?" Linda asked, her trembling voice, the fear growing every second. Dorothy, with an expression that mixed guilt and something else, looked at the figure, who now stared at her with a serious and deep look. The tension in the air was so dense that Beautiful could barely breathe. She felt that something was not right, that the key to the truth was there inside that basement but could not reach her. "Beautiful, there is something you need to understand," Dorothy started but hesitated, as if fighting to find the right words. "I don't want any more secrets, Dorothy. You locked me here. I'm the mother of your grandson. You have to tell me the truth," Linda shouted, the pain of contractions already mixed with the emotional pain of being stuck in that situation. The dark figure approached and crouched near Linda, looking at her with an intensity that seemed to cross her soul. "Linda, you are not here by chance. There is something much bigger happening. Something your mother-in-law has hidden for years," the figure said, her deep mystery voice. Linda didn't understand what she was listening to. She looked at Dorothy, waiting for an explanation, but it was the figure who continued to speak, as if Dorothy had no strength to take over the truth. "Dorothy has her own reasons to want to control your child's birth, but the truth is that she didn't want you to stay here. She feared you to find out everything." Beautiful, with a confused mind. "I didn't know if I believed it or not. What did that figure mean? What was behind that manipulation?" She wanted to believe that this was just another attempt to make her feel guilty, but a part of her being was beginning to question everything she knew about her mother-in-law. "You don't understand, Beautiful. What she wants, what she always wanted, is to have control over everyone's life around her. She didn't know how to deal with the idea of losing it. And you, the figure paused, her eyes now fixed and beautiful. You were becoming the only threat to your control. Dorothy, hearing these words, seemed to crumble. For the first time, she looked beautiful with a loaded look of regret, as if forced to admit a mistake. Linda, I didn't know what to do. The fear of losing you and my grandson consumed me. I didn't want you. It was like the other women. I didn't want you to be weak, like my daughter. Dorothy whispered, her face full of guilt. I just wanted to do things the right way, as I always did. Linda was astonished. What did your mother-in-law mean by "like my daughter"? There was something much deeper hidden in Dorothy's words, something that related to her family's past, something she could never imagine. She had always known that there was something strange in Dorothy's behavior, but never thought it was so dark. My daughter died during childbirth, Dorothy continued, her voice broken. I blamed myself because I couldn't do what I needed to keep her alive, and I didn't want it to happen to you. I just didn't know how to let you be a mother without getting too involved. Linda was silent, digesting the words. She didn't know what to say. The weight of the revelation was crushing it, but at the same time she felt a wave of understanding. Dorothy was not just trying to control her life. She was being consumed by a fear that came from a deep and unresolved trauma. She looked at her mother-in-law, trying to understand the pain she herself carried. Fear, loss, and guilt. All that was part of Dorothy's story, and perhaps even from her own story without her knowing. The dark figure that had remained silent so far. He looked at the two women and with a slight head slope said, "Now you have a chance to overcome it. Together." Linda looked at the figure, her eyes full of confusion, but also of hope she didn't know yet. What did that mean to her? For the baby? For Dorothy? Dorothy, I'm not your daughter, and I won't be your shadow. But I understand now. I understand what you have gone through, Linda said, with a trembling but determined voice. But we need to do this in our way, without further secrets. I'm going to have my son, and you'll be by my side, but in a different way. Dorothy, now with tears in her eyes, nodded slowly. She didn't know what this new journey would look like, but felt for the first time in many years that perhaps it was possible. And so, in that dark basement, surrounded by secrets and trauma, both began to rebuild a relationship marked by pain, but also by hope. The birth of a new chapter, not only for Linda but also for Dorothy, was beginning to take shape. The air in the basement was dense, as if the walls could collapse at any moment, bringing with them all the secrets and tensions accumulated over the years. Linda felt her breath accelerate as contractions intensified. The fear that once seemed to paralyze her now became a force, a primal impulse that forced her to move on, to fight to give birth to her son. Dorothy was by her side, but now her presence was no longer a threat. Linda didn't see the woman who controlled her anymore, but a mother who was somehow trying to redeem herself. Still, being in that basement, far from any medical help, do not get out of your mind. The pain of contractions mingled with the anxiety of being alone, with no one else to help. The mysterious figure who had revealed Dorothy's past was now next to Linda, his constant but silent presence. What did she want? Who was she, after all? Linda looked at her with a questioning look, but the figure did not answer. She was just observing, as if she knew that the true turn point was yet to come. Dorothy crouched next to Linda, holding her hand firmly. For the first time, Linda did not feel the pressure of being judged, but a genuine touch of support. The pain of contractions was overwhelming, but the mother-in-law's touch seemed to calm it in some way. It was as if at that moment the two worlds, Linda and Dorothy's, met in a new reality, one in which fear and guilt no longer ruled their lives. "It's almost there," Dorothy murmured. "You're going well, beautiful. I'm here. I'll be here all the time." Linda wanted to believe her, but the doubt was still around her mind. How could she trust Dorothy, who had locked her in the basement and tried to control her life? How could she forget the pain of feeling so isolated? Even with the promise of support, a part of Linda still felt the need to escape, to look for something more, something safer. And then, at the height of pain, when Linda thought she couldn't stand it anymore, what happened was completely unexpected. The sound of something breaking, a dry crack, traveled the basement. Linda looked at Dorothy, who was standing by her side, and saw that her expression had completely changed. His normally unbeaten eyes were now wide with dread. The door, Dorothy murmured. It can't be. Beautiful, confused, and tense, looked at the entrance of the basement. Something was wrong. Something was happening out there. Something Dorothy had not planned. The shadowy figure next to Linda took a step ahead, his fixed gaze on the door, as if he was expecting something. Dorothy began to walk toward the entrance with hesitant steps, his hand by pressing the wall as if he tried to hold on. She looked at Linda and said with a trembling voice, I knew this could happen, but I never thought it was now." "What are you talking about, Dorothy?" Linda asked, the concern starting to overflow in her voice. She was beginning to understand that the danger was far from over. Something was about to change. But what? The mysterious figure approached Dorothy, and for the first time Linda realized that she was closer to Dorothy than she imagined. It was not just an enigmatic figure, but someone who seemed to have a deep connection with his mother-in-law. The words the figure said at that moment made beautiful freezing. "She came. The time has come, Dorothy. You knew this moment would come. There's no way to hide." The dread took over Dorothy, and she turned to Beautiful with wide eyes as if it had been torn from a nightmare. Something was about to be revealed, something no one could have predicted. "Beautiful, you need to understand. You have to know the truth. I didn't know how to tell you that. I feared you don't forgive me. But what is happening is not just about your child's birth. It's what you are, what you have within you. What you are about to give to light will change everything." Linda, now in a panic, couldn't understand what was going on. "What do you mean? What secret is this? I'm just a pregnant woman, Dorothy. What are you saying?" Dorothy was silent for a moment, and then, with an almost imperceptible voice, he replied, "You don't know what you are carrying. And the truth is that our story was never what it seemed. What you will bring to the world, it's more than just a baby." Linda felt a deep shiver on her spine. She didn't know what her mother-in-law meant, but fear invaded her in an overwhelming way. What was happening? What secret was she about to discover? The basement door, which until then remained locked, suddenly opened. What Linda saw on the other side made her heart stop for a moment. A large, dense shadow appeared at the door, and the feeling of terror invaded the environment. Something was there to end that cycle, and Linda still didn't know what it really meant. Basement door opened completely, and the dark figure at the entrance seemed more threatening than ever. Linda felt a shiver through her spine. Fear enveloped her with an intensity she had never experienced. His mind, already turned on the pain of contractions, was now completely stunned by the presence of that enigmatic shadow. Dorothy, who once seemed so firm, was visibly trembling. His eyes were fixed in the approaching figure, and his body trembled slightly. Linda watched her with a mixture of confusion and fear. What was happening? Who was that person? And more importantly, what did this mean to her and the baby? The figure, with slow and heavy movements, entered the basement, but did not say a word. Her hood still covered her face, but Beautiful could feel the weight of that being in the air. The tension was palpable. The silence extended for several seconds, each of them seeming to last an eternity. Dorothy finally turned to Linda, her eyes full of a deep fear. She seemed to be on the brink of collapse, as if the truth she had hidden for so long was finally being revealed in a way she could no longer control. Linda approached her, the pain of contractions now accompanied by a sense of urgency. Something was about to happen, and she didn't know what to expect. "Dorothy, what's going on? Who is this person? What does she want from us?" Linda asked, the tense and desperate voice. Dorothy's answer came in a trembling whisper. She's the reason for all this. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to prepare you for what was about to happen. What you have inside you, Beautiful. It's not just a baby." Linda felt her heart shoot. What did she mean by that? What was happening at that moment? The dark figure did not move, but his eyes, now visible, seemed to be tightly and beautiful, as if waiting for his reaction. "Beautiful, you don't understand. The baby you carry, he's special. He's not just an ordinary child. He has a destination, a role that you can't understand yet. But soon you will understand. What you will give birth is not just a child. It's something much more powerful." Linda felt a wave of unbelief. What Dorothy was saying was insane. Was she saying the baby wasn't normal? That he had some kind of power? But why would she have to be chosen to carry this burden? What did that mean to your life? To your child's future? The dark figure stepped ahead, as if he was in a hurry, and then said, with a deep voice that reverberated by the basement. "She's right, beautiful. The baby you carry is unique. His fate has already been traced. And now it's time for you to understand what that means. You can't escape it. It will change everything." Fear took over Linda, and she tried to take a step back, but there was nowhere to hide. She was stuck there, with those two mysterious beings, and with an overwhelming truth about to be revealed. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a woman afraid of being a mother. What do you want from me?" The figure took another step, closer now. "You're afraid of the unknown, but this is part of your journey, beautiful. Your child will be the key to a new beginning, for a future you can't understand yet. You just need to accept what's to come." Dorothy, now visibly shaken, looked at Linda, her eyes full of regret. I knew you wouldn't understand. But what I did because I thought it would protect you. The power he carries is something no one can control. Neither me, nor you. It's ancestral." Linda looked at the figure, and then to Dorothy. A deep pain spread through his chest, not just for the physical pain of childbirth, but for the feeling that his life was about to change forever. She looked at the basement door but knew there was no way out. Not now. Whatever it was happening, she would have to face him. The next moment was a blur. The pain of contractions increased, and Linda felt the body being taken by a force that could not control. She shouted, but her words were drowned out of the sound of the wind, as if the air itself was trying to swallow its cry of agony. Dorothy suddenly knelt beside her, his face a mixture of despair and acceptance. "Beautiful. You'll need to be stronger now. It's coming. There's no way back." Linda could not process all the words, but what afflicted her most was not just physical pain, but the growing perception that she was no longer alone. Something was happening there that was much larger than any of us could understand. And then the unexpected happened. The baby was born, but not as beautiful expected. Not with the cry of a healthy child, but with a scary stillness. The silence in the basement was interrupted by a different sound, a sound that seemed to come from another dimension, a deep and mysterious echo. Whatever was happening at that moment, the truth was being revealed in a way that no one there could completely understand. The silence that followed at birth was deafening. Beautiful, exhausted, and in shock, looked at the baby in Dorothy's arms. He was in complete silence without the expected cry of a newborn. His small body was still, his eyes closed, but there was something peculiar in the air, something strange and inexplicable that made it beautiful to feel that it was not an ordinary birth. The feeling of panic took over Linda, but something inside her refused to give in to that overwhelming force. She couldn't get lost at that moment, not now. She needed to understand what was happening. The pain of contractions was still present, but now she was distracted by the confusion that invaded her mind. Dorothy held the baby with excessive care, his fixed and distant gaze. It didn't seem to have the same sense of relief that Linda expected to see in a mother who had just been undergoing delivery. Instead, it seemed to be preparing for something bigger. What was it? And what did she mean by "he has a destination"? Beautiful, with a weak and hoarse voice of so much effort, he asked, "What are you doing, Dorothy? Why don't he cry?" Dorothy slowly turned her head, her heavy eyes with an expression of suffering. There was a mixture of guilt and something else in the woman's eyes. Linda felt that there was something deeper being kept, something she couldn't understand yet. "He can't cry, beautiful. What he is, what he can do. If you knew," Dorothy whispered, his broken voice. Linda felt the fear grow inside him. Something was wrong, and she didn't know what it was. She looked at the baby again, her tight heart. "Tell me, Dorothy. Tell me what's going on. He's not just a child, beautiful. He carries something inside him. Something you can't understand now, but you'll see it over time." Dorothy seemed to fight her own words, as if the pain of revealing them was greater than anything she had ever experienced. Linda was about to question more, when the dark figure approached, interrupting the moment. "She's right," said the figure, her serious and relentless voice. "He cannot be treated as an ordinary child. His child's fate is linked to something much larger than they can understand." Linda looked at the figure, feeling that she was on the edge of a monumental revelation.
"Who are you? What do you know about my son? And what does his destiny mean?" The figure did not respond immediately. Her eyes were fixed on the baby, and for a moment Linda thought she saw something like sadness in her gaze, but that disappeared quickly. "The baby you carry, beautiful, has a role that transcends what you understand about the world. It does not belong to this world, as you know. What you will give birth is a key, not an ordinary child.
Linda could not understand, but something inside her felt that the truth was being slowly revealed, piece by piece, like a puzzle whose pieces were fucked by. "And me?" Linda asked, her voice full of pain and unbelief. "I'm just an ordinary woman. How can I be part of something so big? I just want to be a mother. I just want to live a normal life with my son." Dorothy, still holding the baby, seemed deeply affected by Linda's words. She let out a heavy sigh, as if the pressure of all the secret she had kept for so long was finally becoming unbearable. "Beautiful. You are more than an ordinary woman. What you have within you, it's not just your child's blood. What you bring is an old lineage, something that has been passed from generation to generation. You carry the power to change the future inside, but also the weight of everything it implies." Linda closed her eyes, trying to sue everything. She had always known that there was something different in her life, but she had never imagined that her son's fate could be so vast, so supernatural. "You can't understand it now," the figure said again, "but you'll have to accept, and you'll have to be strong. Your child's future, everyone's future, depends on you." Linda looked at the baby in silence. He still didn't move, but something in his gaze seemed to be a promise. A promise that although it was immense and terrifying, she had a part of something much larger in her hands. And then something inside beautiful changed. She was no longer just a pregnant woman, afraid of childbirth. She was no longer just a victim of her mother-in-law's control. She was facing something that transcended the pain of the moment, something that challenged her to be more than he had ever imagined. Linda felt a strength grow inside her, something she had never experienced before. She didn't know what would come next, nor what the future reserved for her, but she knew that from that moment her life would never be the same. She had to accept the truth, even if she was hard to swallow. She would have to grow, adapt, and, above all, protect her son, the baby who carried such a large destination. Fear was slowly decreasing, giving way to a sense of acceptance. Linda didn't know what the future reserved, but one thing was clear. She was ready to face him with all her strength, and perhaps, even with the courage she had never knew she had. The following days were marked by a tense calm and a growing sense of inevitability. Linda felt like waiting for something, but I didn't know exactly what. The baby, now in Dorothy's arms, was still absolutely silent. Although fear and uncertainty still stopped in the air, she felt something was about to happen, something that would change everything. Dorothy, as much as he tried to hide, could not disguise his anxiety. She was nervous, as if she was waiting for something beyond the birth of the baby. Linda could see the subtle changes in her posture, in her gestures. Each time she looked at the baby, her eyes shone with a mixture of apprehension and relief, as if she were finally seeing something in her life was completed, but with the weight of something dark hanging over it. The mysterious figure, which had hitherto remained silent, was now closer to Linda. The look of the figure seemed penetrating, as if always watching, evaluating every movement of her, as if he knew that something big was about to happen. Linda tried to stay calm. She wanted to understand everything, but each revelation seemed to push her to an even darker place. The fear of the unknown was still present, but something inside it was also changing. She was leaving behind the fear of being an ordinary mother, of having a simple life. Something bigger, more complicated and more dangerous was in front of you. She felt that somehow this journey was hers to live or die. And now, without further choices, she would need to accept her role in the great game of forces that unfolded. "Linda," said Dorothy with a shaky voice, "you need to know that what you are carrying is not just a child. He is the key to something no one else can understand. And now, what is coming will change everything." Linda didn't know if Dorothy's words were a threat or a request for help. She was lost, confused, but not completely disoriented. Whatever it was, she needed to be ready to face. The dark figure, now more present, looked at the baby in Dorothy's arms. "The moment is coming. He cannot remain hidden. What he is needs to be released. He can't be kept in the dark longer. Everyone's destination depends on it." "Liberated?" Linda repeated, not understanding. "What do you mean by that? Free from what?" The figure remained silent for a few seconds, and then said, with a serious voice that seemed to cut the air, "He cannot remain attached to the past. You carry it, but it belongs to something much bigger. What you have done so far was not just for him, but to the future of everyone. Now you need to make a decision. What will you do with that power? How will you deal with what it represents? Linda felt a chill climb the spine. I just want to be a mother. I just want to give him a normal life. There is no normality for what it carries. What is about to happen is no longer back beautiful. You have to make the choice now. Dorothy looked lost. She looked at the figure with an expression of despair. What Linda was about to face seemed to be something from another world, something she could never have predicted. But what most shocked her was the fact that her mother, in law, who had always tried to control her life, was now as vulnerable as she. I can't hide it anymore, beautiful, Dorothy whispered. I don't know what he can do, but I know you can't go back. Now that he was born, there is no way to go back to what it was before. You have to decide. You need to know how to deal with the power he has. Linda felt a growing pressure on her chest. She looked at the baby in silence. The fear she felt was no longer just about motherhood, but about something much more complex, more terrifying. She was being confronted with something that surpassed her abilities, something she didn't know how to deal with. But deep down, part of it knew I couldn't escape. Reality was unfolding before her, and her decision would now be crucial. She didn't know what to do, but she knew she would be tested in a way she had never imagined. And with that, the only thing left was to face what was coming. I don't know what to do, Linda murmured, but I need to try. I need to do the right thing. I can't leave him. He is controlled by something I don't understand. The dark figure approached Linda and put his hand on his shoulder with a soft but heavy gesture. You are better prepared than you think, beautiful. Don't be afraid to make the right choice. And then the moment has come. Whatever was about to happen, now it was about to reveal itself. Linda was standing, her body exhausted and the mind confused. The baby in his arms seemed increasingly heavy, and the feeling of being in the face of something beyond what she could control only increased. Every word of Dorothy, every look of the dark figure, made her feel that she was on the brink of a catastrophic revelation. Whatever she was about to face now was inevitable. The tension in the air was palpable. The environment in the basement was dark, as if the house's own shadows were becoming denser, dragging on the walls and the floor. Linda felt the weight of the words of the dark figure in her mind. The power of the baby, the fate, the key to the future. All this was about it now. You need to act now, the figure said, his severe voice reverberating on the walls, making beautiful shudder. The baby. He can't grow secret. What he carries needs to be released. Linda looked at Dorothy, the woman who for so many years she had feared. Dorothy was as helpless as she now, her shaking hands holding the baby like a relic. The fear of losing control seemed to consume everyone there. I can't continue like this, Linda said. Her voice hesitated, but determined. She knew that although she did not completely understand what was happening, the choice was in her hands. She had to make the decision to accept the power of the child who carried or reject it and get lost in the dark. What do I do? Linda shouted, almost begging for a clear answer. The dark figure stepped ahead, his almost physical presence as if shaping his own air around him. Accept what is yours, beautiful. The baby's fate is linked to yours. There is no other way. He needs you. The power he has. He cannot be contained. He needs to be released. The voice of the figure was a distant echo, a call for something much bigger. Linda looked at the baby in her arms, the feeling of something immense and uncontrollable growing inside her. She didn't want to believe what she was listening to, but at the same time she knew she had no choices anymore. It was as if an invisible force was pulling her forward to a future she couldn't control, but she was now linked to. The baby, in silence, looked straight at her. Her eyes, though so small, carried something strange, a deep glow, as if he knew something she didn't understand, a sense of power, something she could barely understand, but who felt intensely deep in her soul, began to grow inside Linda. Dorothy, in a last sigh of internal struggle, finally said, "Beautiful, you need to be strong. I don't know what will happen when he breaks out, but you need to control it. Everyone's future depends on it." The sound of those words reverberated in Linda. She didn't know if she was prepared, she didn't know if she could do what was needed. But one thing became clear. The only way to protect the future of his son, of all, was to embrace the power he brought with him. She could not allow fear to paralyze her. "I accept," she said, more to herself than to others. The decision was made. She was ready to face whatever was about to happen. The dark figure smiled, a smile that didn't seem human, more like a shadow that dissolved in his own darkness. Now the power will be yours. Get ready, beautiful. What you carry is not just a child. He will be the key to something you never imagined, but you need to be ready to guide you. Before Linda could react, a wave of energy traveled the basement. The air was heavy, as if the space was being compressed by an invisible force. Linda felt a burst of heat inside her, something that made her shudder. She looked at the baby, and at that moment, understood. The light emanated from it, not in a visible way, but from a presence that seemed to involve the whole environment. It was as if the baby's own essence was challenging the laws of reality. The dark figure retreated, his eyes now shining from a deep knowledge, as if he knew what was about to happen. Linda felt that the control had moved to her. The connection with his son was stronger than ever, and with it came the understanding of his true role. The baby, so small, was not just a human being. He carried the power to change fate, to rewrite the future of all. She looked at Dorothy, who now seemed almost apathetic, lost. What her mother-in-law feared, what she had not been able to do, Linda now had in her hands. She was the key. It was the force that could channel and direct this power. But there was something even deeper than Linda was beginning to realize. Power did not come from an external origin, but from something within it. She was not just giving birth to a child. She was giving birth to a new reality. The basement floor began to tremble and the baby finally began to cry. But it was not the cry of an ordinary child. It was a serious, powerful sound that reverberated the walls of the house. The world seemed to be unfolding around them, and Linda knew at that moment that the future would no longer be the same. The baby's cry echoed around the house as a foreshadowing, a mark that the transformation was complete. Linda felt a wave of being able to go through her body, something she never imagined she could experiment. What once seemed like an uncontrollable fear now turned into a force that pulsed inside her, linked to the baby in a way she could no longer deny. The birth of the baby filled the environment, and Beautiful knew with absolute clarity that nothing would be the same after that moment. The basement, once dark and oppressive, seemed to be illuminating with the intensity of the energy emanating from the baby. The air became denser, as if time itself was distorting. The dark figure, which once was distant and enigmatic, now looked beautiful with silent approval, as if I saw in her what she herself perhaps didn't know it could be. Dorothy, still holding the baby, looked at Linda with an expression of astonishment. His eyes were wide, and his mouth opened and closed without words. She knew that what was happening now was not something she could control. On some deep level, she already knew that the real strength was in Beautiful, and that all the weight of the future was on her. Linda, you did it, Dorothy said, the trembling voice full of unbelief. Linda stared at her for a long moment, feeling the weight of those words. She didn't know how she had come there, but she knew that at that moment she had achieved something that transcended all doubts, all fears. She had given birth not only to a child, but to a new era. The baby, who was now in his arms, seemed at peace, his eyes shining with a light that was not of this world. The crying had ceased, and a deep calm set in the environment. The energy that involved Beautiful and the baby began to dissipate, leaving behind a sense of serenity and power, as if a large wave had passed through it and finally calmed. Linda looked at her mother-in-law, her eyes now smoother. I'm no longer who you thought I was, Dorothy. And my son, he will not be controlled. He will be free. Dorothy, with teary eyes, looked at the baby in silence. She knew there was no way to go back. What Linda had done, what she had become, was something that surpassed her in ways she never imagined. And deep down she felt a respect for the woman that, for so long, she had underestimated. Beautiful, with the baby in his arms, turned to the dark figure. What happens now? What do I do with it? The dark figure smiled, but this time there was a softness in his gaze. Now you have the key. You know what to do. The future is in your hands, Beautiful. Your son will be the catalyst, but the real change comes from you. You will be the guardian of what is coming. And with these words, the figure disappeared, leaving Beautiful and Dorothy alone in the calm of the basement. Linda looked at the baby once more. Your son. The future was before her, no longer like a threat, but as a promise. She knew the journey that started there would not be easy, but it was ready. For her, for him, for everyone. And in doing so, she finally felt the peace she always sought. Fear, doubt, pain, everything is left behind. She was ready to be the mother her son needed, and more importantly, it was ready to be the woman the world needed. And now, what would you do if you had the power to change the future? Linda's journey and her son is just beginning, but everyone's fate is in his hands. What would you do in your place? Share your reflections and emotions about this story in the comments. If you liked it, be sure to share with friends who also love a story full of mystery and emotion. The future expects, and it is more powerful than you think.